The room was packed. Hundreds of students leaned forward, listening to one of the most powerful conservative voices in America. Charlie Kirk, the face of Turning Point USA, the man who helped Donald Trump claw his way back into the White House, was doing what he did best, challenging, provoking, and electrifying the crowd. And then, in a single deafening crack, it was all over. The shot ripped through the auditorium at Utah Valley University. Charlie Kirk staggered, his hand rising to his neck before collapsing as screams erupted. Chaos swallowed the room, students diving under chairs, security rushing forward, people crying out in disbelief. America had just lost one of its loudest political fighters, and no one in that room knew why. But this wasn't random, this wasn't senseless. Hours earlier, a note had been left under a keyboard in a quiet apartment across Utah, a confession disguised as a secret. The killer had spelled it out before pulling the trigger. "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." The man who wrote those words wasn't some shadowy extremist hiding on the fringes. He wasn't even a stranger to the values Kirk stood against. He was a young man, just 22, raised in small-town Utah, torn between his father's diehard loyalty to Trump and his own new identity shaped by love, politics, and anger. His name was Tyler Robinson, and when his bullet pierced Charlie Kirk's throat, it didn't just kill a man, it cracked open America's deepest divides. This is the story of how a son turned against his own family's politics, how secret texts and hidden notes revealed the mind of a killer, and how the assassination of Charlie Kirk may mark a chilling new chapter in the nation's descent into political violence. It was September 10, 2025, a Wednesday night in Orem, Utah. For Charlie Kirk, it was another stop on a nationwide tour. He had been drawing crowds at universities across America, talking about freedom, faith, and the future of conservatism. Utah Valley University wasn't the largest venue he'd spoken at, but the energy inside that room was undeniable. Students packed the auditorium, some loyal supporters wearing MAGA hats, others critics ready to challenge him during the Q&A. Charlie thrived on that tension. He wanted debate, he wanted confrontation. It was the fuel that kept his speeches fiery, unpredictable, and unforgettable. That night, he walked onto the stage smiling, shaking hands, tossing out a few Turning Point USA hats into the audience. Cameras flashed, the crowd buzzed. It felt like any other rally until it didn't. About 30 minutes in, the conversation turned to one of Kirk's most controversial topics, gun rights and transgender issues. A student asked a heated question, and Kirk, always unafraid of a fight, leaned in with that trademark smirk. He started answering, gesturing with one hand, pointing to the crowd. That was when the silence was broken. The crack of a rifle sliced through the auditorium. For a split second, no one moved. Then the screams began. People ducked, scrambled, clawed at each other to reach the exits. Kirk stumbled, his words cut short, blood staining his shirt as he collapsed to the floor. Security swarmed the stage, but the damage was done. The shot had been fired from the roof of a nearby building, a perfect vantage point overlooking the crowd. The shooter didn't miss. News broke within minutes. Phones lit up with push alerts. Charlie Kirk shot during university speech. Social media exploded. Videos from terrified students, shaky and chaotic, went viral almost instantly. America watched in real time as one of its most polarizing figures was struck down in front of an audience of young people he had spent years trying to win over. For his supporters, it was unthinkable. Charlie wasn't just a commentator or an activist. To millions, he was a warrior for their values, a young man who built a movement from scratch and turned it into a national powerhouse. He had Donald Trump's ear. He had shaped the conservative youth movement. He was, to many, the bridge between evangelical America and the next generation. And now he was gone. The tributes came pouring in that night. Politicians, pastors, and pundits called it a tragedy, an attack on free speech, a sign of America's crumbling civility. On the other side, critics of Kirk, some of whom despised his rhetoric, found themselves grappling with the uneasy question, how far have we let this hatred go? But while the nation mourned or argued, investigators were already piecing together the puzzle. And what they uncovered in the days that followed would shock everyone, because this wasn't a random act of violence. The killer hadn't just picked up a gun in a moment of rage. He had written his intentions down. He had confessed in private before pulling the trigger. He had left a trail of words that revealed both his motive and his obsession. That man was Tyler Robinson. At first, no one knew his name. Surveillance cameras showed a shadowy figure moving on the rooftop. Witnesses described a young man fleeing the scene, but the picture was blurry, incomplete. Police released images to the public, hoping someone would recognize him. And someone did, his mother. She called her husband in shock. The still frame looked like their son. When the father saw it, his stomach dropped. The shape, the build, the way he carried himself, it was Tyler, their 22-year-old son. The confrontation at home was tense, heartbreaking. When his parents pressed him, Tyler didn't deny it. Instead, he confessed, saying he wanted to end his own life. But before he could, a family friend, a retired sheriff's deputy, stepped in. He persuaded Tyler to surrender to face what he had done. Within 48 hours of the shooting, the suspect was in custody. And what investigators found next turned a shocking murder into a chilling story of betrayal, politics, and a mind consumed by anger. Because tucked under a keyboard in his apartment, Tyler had left behind a note. And in that note, he wrote the words that would echo across courtrooms, news broadcasts, and living rooms across America. "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." The note was just the beginning. Text messages, DNA evidence, and chilling engravings on bullets would soon paint the picture of a young man who had planned every step, who believed he was striking a blow against hatred, but who, in doing so, unleashed a wave of it unlike anything he could have imagined. The death of Charlie Kirk wasn't just a moment of violence. It was a crack in the national psyche. A story of politics colliding with family, of ideology tearing love apart, of a country so divided that even a son could turn against everything he was raised to believe. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because what Tyler Robinson did in those days leading up to September 10 would reveal more than just a crime. It would reveal the cost of living in a nation where words become weapons, and where one young man decided that pulling a trigger was the only way to silence them. Tyler Robinson wasn't born to be the face of political violence. He was born in a quiet town in Utah, far from the chaos of Washington, far from the rallies, far from the cameras. He was raised in a home where Sunday mornings meant church, where the television blared Fox News, and where the name Donald Trump wasn't just a politician, it was a rallying cry. His father, James Robinson, was the kind of man who didn't just vote for Trump, he believed in him. For James, Trump was more than a candidate. He was a savior for a country that, in his eyes, had lost its way. He wore the red hat, he quoted the speeches. He went to the rallies whenever he could, dragging his kids along to breathe in the atmosphere of loyalty and fire. Tyler grew up in that shadow. He listened to the arguments at the dinner table. He heard the anger in his father's voice when the news talked about immigration or gun laws or radical leftists. He didn't question it, not at first. For years, he absorbed it like so many kids do. Politics wasn't just politics in the Robinson house. It was identity, it was loyalty, it was blood. But something shifted when Tyler turned 18. He left the comfort of home and began carving out his own life. He enrolled at Utah Valley University, the same campus where years later he would pull a trigger that changed history. He wasn't surrounded anymore by just his family's views. He was exposed to new people, new voices, and new ideas. And most importantly, he fell in love. Her name was Marissa. She wasn't just another student. She was bold, outspoken, and unafraid to challenge the very politics that Tyler had grown up hearing in his own living room. She was also transgender. And when Tyler fell for her, the clash between the world he grew up in and the world he was discovering exploded. To his father, Charlie Kirk wasn't just a commentator. He was a warrior for the beliefs James held sacred, traditional values, conservative Christianity, the fight against what Kirk called radical gender ideology. For Tyler, those same speeches were daggers. They weren't just debates on policy. They felt like attacks on the person he loved, on the relationship that had given him a sense of identity beyond his family's shadow. The house that once felt safe now felt like a battleground. Dinner table conversations turned into shouting matches. James would quote Trump or Kirk, Tyler would push back, angrier each time. The generational divide was sharp, but this wasn't just politics, this was personal. One evening, James accused his son of abandoning everything he was raised to believe. Tyler shot back that his father's politics were tearing people apart, were dehumanizing people like Marissa, people who just wanted to live in peace. It ended with Tyler storming out, slamming the door behind him, his mother crying quietly at the kitchen sink. For James, it was betrayal. For Tyler, it was survival. The more Kirk's speeches made headlines, the more Tyler's resentment grew. When Kirk mocked transgender people, Tyler heard his partner's name between the lines. When Kirk spoke about defending American values, Tyler heard rejection of the life he was building. Every viral clip, every debate, every soundbite, it wasn't just noise on social media. It was personal ammunition that carved deeper wounds into Tyler's heart. In private, his phone filled with text messages, angry rants sent late at night to Marissa or to a few close friends. He complained about his father, about the suffocating culture of Trumpism that dominated his family. He spoke about how voices like Kirk's weren't just wrong but dangerous. To his friends, it looked like venting. To investigators later, it looked like a storm brewing. Tyler began writing in journals, not essays or reflections but raw, jagged thoughts. He scribbled about hypocrisy, about pain, about the anger he carried toward people like Charlie Kirk. And tucked between those entries were darker words, hints of violence, half-formed ideas of striking back. The Robinson family was cracking apart and James could feel it. He still loved his son, but he couldn't understand him. He couldn't understand why the boy he raised would reject everything he believed. And Tyler couldn't understand why his father couldn't see the humanity in the person he loved. They weren't speaking the same language anymore. That silence grew heavier in the months leading up to September 10. Tyler grew more withdrawn, spending more time at Marissa's apartment, less time at home. When he did visit, the air was thick with tension. His father would try to talk politics. Tyler would shut down or snap back. His mother tried to bridge the gap, but her voice was drowned out by the weight of two worlds colliding under one roof. And yet, under that silence, Tyler was planning. In his apartment, he started stockpiling thoughts and bullets. He wasn't careless. He wasn't loud about it. He was deliberate. Investigators would later find that he had engraved messages onto the bullets themselves, inscriptions like personal manifestos etched into cold metal. It was a chilling sign of premeditation, of a young man not just angry but ready to act on it. The turning point came when Tyler learned Charlie Kirk was coming to his campus. The same man whose speeches he believed endangered people like Marissa, the same man his father admired, was about to stand on a stage just minutes from his apartment. For most students, it was an event. For Tyler, it was an opportunity. He confided in no one, not his friends, not Marissa, not even in the heat of an argument with his father. He bottled it up, channeling his rage into a single plan. And in that quiet apartment under the glow of a desk lamp, he wrote the words that investigators would later hold up as the key to his intent. "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." He hid the note under his keyboard as if daring the world to find it after the fact. And in his mind, the act wasn't just about Kirk. It was about his father. It was about striking at the very heart of the ideology that had divided their home, divided their love, divided their lives. Tyler Robinson wasn't born a killer. He was shaped into one by the collision of family loyalty and personal identity, by the war between a father's devotion to Trump and a son's devotion to someone Trump's movement rejected. And when he picked up that rifle, he wasn't just aiming at Charlie Kirk. In his mind, he was aiming at his father's world. The story of September 10 wasn't just about politics. It was about a family torn apart, a son who could no longer live under the weight of his father's beliefs, and a nation so divided that those fractures spilled out of dinner tables and into the blood-stained floor of a university auditorium. On the surface, Tyler Robinson looked calm. To his neighbors, to classmates passing him on campus, even to Marissa, his partner, he carried himself like a man just going through the motions of life. A little quiet, a little distracted, but nothing out of the ordinary. But beneath that calm, something darker was churning. He wasn't just brooding anymore, he was preparing. The most haunting clue to his state of mind wasn't found in a manifesto or a video rant. It was found in the quietest of places, a slip of paper tucked under his computer keyboard, just a handful of words but enough to change everything. "I had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk, and I'm going to take it." That note wasn't an accident. It wasn't a passing thought. It was a declaration. He wanted it hidden yet discoverable, something left behind, as if he knew deep down he wouldn't be able to keep this secret forever. And soon he couldn't. The day of the shooting, Tyler sent Marissa a text. "Drop what you're doing, look under my keyboard." She didn't understand. She thought it was strange, maybe even playful. But when she pulled the keyboard back and saw the note, her stomach dropped. Her hands shook as she read the words again and again, hoping she had misunderstood, hoping it was some kind of sick joke. She picked up her phone immediately. "What? You're joking, right?" Her text exploded across his screen, a desperate mix of shock and disbelief. Tyler's reply was cold, heavy, almost rehearsed. "To be honest, I had hoped to keep this secret till I died of old age. I am sorry to involve you." There it was, not a denial, not even hesitation. It was a confession. Marissa's world spun. The man she loved, the man she believed was just angry, just hurt, was admitting something unthinkable. She texted back again, begging for clarity, pleading for this not to be real. "You weren't the one who did it, right?" The dots on her screen appeared. He was typing, and then the message came through like a blade. I'm sorry. 3 words. A confession. A life shattered." Marissa felt torn in 2 directions at once. Part of her wanted to believe him, to somehow understand. Another part of her was terrified of what he had done, of what he might still do, of what it meant for both of them. Her phone buzzed again. Tyler wasn't done. When she asked why, his response carried the weight of months of bitterness. "I had enough of his hatred. Some hate can't be negotiated out." In that sentence, everything clicked. For Tyler, this wasn't random. This wasn't madness. In his mind, it was a mission, a twisted, personal crusade against a man he believed represented everything tearing his world apart. Marissa begged him to explain, and he did in fragments. He admitted he had been planning it for a bit over a week. He described how he dropped the rifle near campus after fleeing, how he worried about leaving it behind, how he regretted not circling back for it. Every message was another crack in the dam, spilling out secrets he had bottled up. If I am able to grab my rifle unseen, I will have left no evidence. I'm wishing I had circled back and grabbed it as soon as I got to my vehicle. I'm worried what my old man would do if I didn't bring back Grandpa's rifle. Even in the middle of his confession, his father lingered in his mind. The rifle wasn't just a weapon, it was family history, a relic passed down, now used in the most horrific way possible. Investigators would later say those texts read like a breadcrumb trail. But to Marissa, in that moment, they weren't evidence. They were a nightmare unraveling in real time. She had loved him, she had defended him, she had believed his anger was just words, and now those words had become bullets. Her phone buzzed again, another confession, this one almost mocking in its casual tone. Remember how I was engraving bullets? The F messages are mostly a big meme. The detail was chilling. Not just the violence, but the thought of turning it into a twisted inside joke, a mark left behind for anyone who discovered the weapon. It was a glimpse into Tyler's fractured mind, a blend of deadly seriousness and internet irony, where life and death blurred with memes and rebellion. For Marissa, the weight was unbearable. She sat staring at her phone, her heart pounding, torn between love and horror. Should she call the police? Should she protect him? Should she run? And yet deep down she knew it was already too late. The words were written, the bullets were fired, Charlie Kirk was gone. What remained now were secrets. Secrets Tyler could no longer carry alone, and secrets Marissa had never wanted to inherit. She wasn't just his partner anymore, she was a witness, a confidant against her will, someone holding the smoking gun of his words. And those words, those digital fingerprints, would become the heart of the prosecution's case. But in those first hours, before investigators pieced it together, before prosecutors spoke at press conferences, before the world knew the name Tyler Robinson, it was just a broken couple exchanging messages across glowing screens. One confessing, the other breakings. Tyler had tried to keep it secret, but secrets have a way of clawing to the surface, and once Marissa saw that note under the keyboard, the truth could never be buried again. The tragedy wasn't just what Tyler had done in front of a crowd. It was what he whispered afterward in the intimacy of a text message, the quiet confessions that revealed a storm long in the making. And as investigators dug deeper, those messages would expose not just a crime but a motive. Not just a shooting, but a story of love, betrayal, and rage that had been building for far longer than anyone imagined. The shockwaves didn't stop with Marissa. Because as investigators began to release images of the suspect, another group of people was staring at them with growing dread. Tyler Robinson's own family. His mother was the first to say it out loud. "That looks like him," she whispered when the surveillance pictures flashed across a news broadcast. Her husband looked closer and his face fell. "It is him." Imagine the weight of that moment. Your son, your child, on the news, not as a victim, not as a bystander, but as the suspect in the murder of one of the most polarizing political voices in America. The family could have stayed silent, they could have looked away, but instead they confronted him. When they called Tyler, his voice cracked under the weight of guilt. He didn't deny it, he didn't fight, he simply said he wanted to end his own life. His father begged him to come home to talk, to not throw everything away in a single reckless act of despair. And eventually Tyler agreed. He returned, walking into the tense silence of a home that once held family dinners, arguments over politics, and the ordinary struggles of daily life, now shattered by something extraordinary and irreversible. But his parents weren't done. They reached out to a trusted family friend, a retired sheriff's deputy, someone with the authority, the calm, the history to break through Tyler's spiraling thoughts. And that friend did what no one else could. He convinced Tyler to surrender. Not to hide, not to run, not to make his family complicit in a crime that had already destroyed too much. By Thursday night, Tyler Robinson was in custody. The story could have ended there with a capture, a booking photo, and a closed chapter. But the real fallout was only beginning. Because investigators didn't just have a suspect in custody, they had texts, a note, DNA, and now a family's testimony. Tyler's mother told investigators what she had seen in her son over the past year. The political shift, the growing bitterness, the romance with his transgender roommate. She painted a picture of a young man torn between worlds, the world of his father, who had embraced the MAGA movement with full force, and the world Tyler was building for himself, one where he supported gay and transgender rights. The house had become a battlefield of words. Dinner table conversations turned into shouting matches. Father and son clashing, not over grades or chores, but over identity, politics, and the future of the country. Tyler confided to his partner in texts that his father had become a diehard MAGA. To him, that wasn't just a label. It was a wedge, one that pushed him further away from his family and deeper into his own isolation. And it was in that isolation, investigators believe, that his anger hardened into something darker. When prosecutors revealed the evidence to the public, the country reeled. Not just because Charlie Kirk was dead, but because of how and why. The bolt-action rifle left behind near the rooftop. The DNA on the triggers. The text that read like a confession written in real time. And the note hidden under the keyboard that laid bare his intention before the first shot was even fired. This wasn't chaos, this wasn't a moment of passion, this was planned, deliberate, cold. And yet behind the coldness was something heartbreakingly human. A young man torn between his love for his partner, his hatred for what he saw in Kirk's words, and his inability to reconcile those feelings with the family he came from. That's what made the betrayal cut so deep. It wasn't just betrayal of law. It wasn't just betrayal of the public trust. It was betrayal of his parents who raised him. Of his partner who thought she knew him. Of a nation already fractured, now forced to confront the reality of political violence head-on. The arrest brought temporary relief, but relief is not the same as healing. On campuses, students questioned how security had failed. In Washington, leaders debated whether political rhetoric had become too toxic to survive. And in homes across America, families who were already divided by politics saw themselves in the Robinsons, parents and children staring at each other across an unbridgeable chasm. And in the middle of it all was the cold reality: Charlie Kirk was gone. A father, a husband, a leader to millions. His voice silenced by a rifle, his legacy now tangled in the story of a young man who believed the only way to fight hatred was with blood. But even as Tyler sat in a jail cell, even as prosecutors promised to seek the death penalty, the questions lingered. Was this just one man's choice, or was it a symptom of something larger? Was Tyler Robinson the face of political extremism, or the face of a generation lost between extremes? And most haunting of all, how many more young men and women are standing right now on the edge of that same choice, ready to step into violence instead of stepping back into dialogue? Because the truth is, Tyler didn't just fire a bullet at Charlie Kirk. He fired it into the heart of America's division. And now we're left to wonder, will we let that wound heal, or will we keep tearing it wider until there's nothing left to hold us together? This story isn't just about Charlie Kirk or Tyler Robinson or even one tragic night in Utah. It's about us, the choices we make, the anger we carry, and the lines we're willing to cross. If this story shook you, don't let it vanish with the next headline. Share it, talk about it, and ask the hard questions. Because ignoring it only guarantees one thing: that it will happen again. And next time it could be even closer to home.